So you're ready to begin a D&D session. You've decided you're ready to become a dungeon master, and maybe you've even started running a session 0. If you haven't done either of those things, well, congratulations, I just so happen to have videos on both of those topics. So the first thing you need to decide before prepping a game is, are you going to run an adventure book or a homebrew game? An adventure book is a book that handles the majority of the prep for you. The encounters, the maps, the story, it's all in the book for you to just take and plop right into your game. Most adventure books published by Wizards of the Coast take place in Forgotten Realms or Faerun. However, they do publish some other books that have other settings. A homebrew game means that you're gonna build the adventure. The story is of your creation. Encounters are yours to build, descriptions are yours to tell. You can build your own fantasy world that's totally unique to your players. However, if that sounds intimidating to you, you don't necessarily have to. Campaign setting books are published to give DMs enough information so that way they can effectively and accurately place these settings into their games. You can find some of these for the Forgotten Realms, such as Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. However, there are many others published, especially if you're willing to go outside the realm of books published by Wizards of the Coast. You can also use a world that you're comfortable with from other media. If you're a huge fan of, let's say, The Elder Scrolls, you might not need an adventure book or a campaign setting to run a good D&D game in the world of Skyrim. On top of that, a lot of video game worlds have resources that you can use to translate them into D&D, such as online maps, wikis of timelines and characters, or just going into the game and seeing what things look like. Now, there's a lot of pros and cons when it comes to using homebrew and using adventure books for both DMs and players. So it's important to know what each type is good for, and then pick the one that works best for your strengths. An adventure book requires a lot less work on behalf of the dungeon master. You don't have to write cities or towns or gods or conflicts. That's all there for you right there in the book. The Forgotten Realms is a very well documented setting, with multiple different wikis dedicated to giving you every piece of information that you could possibly ever want. Of course, just because a wiki says something about the world doesn't mean that you have to include it in your version of it, but if you want that information there, you can use it if you're inclined to. I mean, the amount of text isn't really that bad most of the time. It really should hopefully take 10 to 20 minutes of reading to have read 2 to 3 hours of playable content. But if you end up in a situation where your players go farther than you anticipated and go farther through the game than you have read, and you try to read from the book as the adventure goes, you'll find that it really does not work that well. So here's a bit of advice. If you're going to use an adventure book, don't just read it ahead of time and assume that you can use the book as a guide into your session. The words are small, and the stuff that you might need moment to moment might be on totally separate pages, and if the nerves start getting to you, well, it's gonna be hopeless. Instead, while you're reading, you should be taking notes, and not just copying from the book word for word, but breaking down the basic information that you need, formatted in a way that makes the most sense to you. You still should have the book with you to get a more detailed picture or refresh your memory if you need to, but that's all you should need, and ideally relying mostly on your notes. This can also be good practice for creating notes for a homebrew campaign if that's something you're interested in doing in the future. Now, a problem I have with adventure books is the lack of freedom of choice that a homebrew game can give. And now, homebrew games can be just as railroady or even more railroady than adventure books. I just see that homebrew games have a lot more opportunity to be more open-ended than adventure books do. I've found that most adventure books published by Wizards of the Coast aren't made for two different parties to go through the book and have totally different experiences from each other. Almost every party will go to the same locations in a very similar order and have basically the same outcomes happen. And if the outcomes are different, well, they don't matter to the greater story moving on. They don't really have future consequences. This isn't necessarily true for every book, but even for the books that it's not true, I've noticed it tends to be like a section of the book is more open-ended and has more consequences that lead later on. but it's not the entire book. The books are written in a way to give the DM multiple ways to coerce the party down the path that they want them to go down, and if not, just downright force them down that path. A new player might not even notice what's happening, but when you notice it, that freedom that D&D is supposed to give just outright fades away. For example, in the book Strixhaven Curriculum of Chaos, almost every adventure starts the exact same way, with a fellow student that the players know coming up to them and saying, "Hey, go over here, look at this thing. Hey, I have something cool to show you, come over here. Hey, have you heard this? Come this way." While I was running the book, I hated these because it makes no attempt to hide the fact that there's this adventurer over here and this is what's prepped, and if you don't go over here, you won't have fun. But it just doesn't feel authentic. They don't have a real authentic reason to go and do that thing. It's just kind of thrust upon them forcibly. And to be fair, I think that some railroading, and even some harsh railroading, is fine to get the party down the path of the adventure that you have planned, but when it's so blatantly obvious, it totally feels like I'm killing the immersion of the game. Strixhaven just does a particularly bad job at convincing the party to go on an adventure. And it's not just leading into the adventure either, but the adventure itself. Most quests in the D&D adventure books have a very simple set of complete states. And even if the party fail to complete the quest, they usually put multiple backups in place, so that way you cannot fail. Another example. In Lost Mines of Phandelver, the party are traveling along the road where they are attacked by goblins, who then retreat after the party take a few of them out, or if the party are defeated, they get robbed and then the goblins run off and the party wake up, having been injured and having their stuff stolen. They also find on the road a couple of dead horses, and if they happen to investigate, realize these horses belong to a friend that they're currently supposed to be finding. Now, I actually think this works as an adventure hook. The party were attacked, so they might want to go after their attackers for revenge, especially if they had their stuff stolen. This is also a commonly traveled road, so there's a risk of the goblins coming back and attacking more innocent people, so the party might want to get involved to stop that from happening. And if none of those are good reasons, the safety of the person who they're supposed to go meet is another good reason for them to go after these goblins. Even if the party forget to check the horses, they're going to show up in Phandalin, get there, realize that their friend isn't there, and most likely put two and two together and go back and try to look for him. For a party to ignore this quest is basically just them telling you that they are not interested in having an adventure and to just write a conflict-free slice of life game, or just not run a game at all. There are plenty of great reasons to do this adventure, and I think this is a particularly good example of how adventure books sometimes do this right. Once you follow them and get to their hideout, none of the choices you make will matter after you leave. Now, to be fair, there are rewards for doing certain things, like keeping your friend alive, and you can even do things out of order if you're clever enough. But at the end of the day, it's all going to come back to being the same thing. However, this does not have to be the case in homebrew games. Adventure books have those limitations because they need to work completely for any group. They have to work without fail no matter who your players are and who your DM is. For a homebrew game, it just needs to work for your party and you. If the players manage to do actions in a homebrew game that kill the big bad evil guy really early on, that's a fun and exciting thing. In an adventure book, that might just end the game right then and there, as if that's the complete state of the adventure. Once you've done it, the adventure's done. In homebrew, if you're doing it right, you're writing your story session by session. If the players make decisions that you weren't prepared for, well, you don't have to follow a script. The script is going to change all the time. You can have an idea of where things are going, but if the party break from that, you can write new things instead. With an adventure book, it's stuck on a straight line, and if the party breaks off, the only thing you can try to do is to try to force them back into that line. If the party decide they don't actually want to live in a human society, but instead want to help out the goblins and work with them and live underground and attack commoners, well, if you're okay with running that type of game as a DM, that can be the game now. Because of the nature of a homebrew game, which is a story being written as it's being told, the characters can be much more a part of the main plot and have much deeper connections to everything going on. In my own game, I had a player tell me that they wanted to be a changeling working for an archfey in the Feywild. And for me, this just became a major part of the campaign. I had no ideas for what the big powers of my game were, but now all of a sudden, the Feywild were a major power and very important to the story. Then after that, another player came to me and they said that they wanted to be a warlock whose patron was from the Shadowfell. Now all of a sudden I'm thinking about the Shadowfell and the Feywild as two opposing forces, connecting the Shadowfell, her Shadowfell patron, to the Archfey of my other character, and combining them, and now I'm creating this whole double war going on within the multiverse and all this stuff that's like the bigger picture of the world. And that just came from my players telling me what characters they wanted to make. And you can never have that in an adventure book, because an adventure book can't prepare for the players saying that they want an Archfey mother or a Shadowfell patron. All of those amazing experiences of betrayals and plot twists, all of that could only happen because I wasn't running a game that had to work for any party. My game only needed to work for my party and those players. However, homebrew games aren't all sunshine and daisies. Running a homebrew game can be a lot of extra baggage. Building your own world takes time, skill, and there's a pretty good chance that the standard of quality that you might want it to be might just not be there. This is also true with your characters, your plot, your encounters, your descriptions. The ones in the adventure books are written by game designers and writers and people whose job it is to make good all of the things I just said before. And you might not have those skills, and you might not be as good, and you might want it to be better, but you might not be able to achieve that because you are creating a homebrew thing and doing everything on your own. I mean, seriously, look up the credits to an adventure book. Look how many people it takes to make one of these. Yes, these books have their problems, but they're also made by many talented people all coming together, bringing in all these different skill sets, and you only have the skill sets that you have. I'm not insulting your skill sets, by the way. I don't know you. I'm just talking into a camera right now. Now, a skilled DM can prep a homebrew game in about an hour of sitting down and focusing on preparing it. However, when you're just starting off, you're not going to be a skilled DM. Now, that isn't to say you can't mix and match adventure and homebrew. My Strixhaven game that I mention in half of my videos now use the adventure books as something I can fall back on in case I need to, but generally all the adventures that I'm writing are my own adventures. Now, if you want to know my final conclusion, I think that for starting DMs, they should start off with an adventure book, but use it as training wheels. As you feel more comfortable, don't be afraid to go off book and change things to fit more of what you want. In fact, don't be afraid to change things so far that you have totally gone off script and have no way of getting back into the story of the adventure book. Or if you're fine and happy with the book as it is and don't feel the need to change anything and aren't interested in building your own world, leave it all as it is. Your highest priority as a DM should always be having fun. I know I keep saying this in pretty much every video, but I want to make sure that you get it through your head that being a DM isn't a part-time job, it's not a paid position, it's a hobby. And hobbies are supposed to be fun. Sometimes hobbies can feel like work. However, if you're not enjoying it, you shouldn't be doing it. You should DM because you want to DM, and you should do it in a way that you like. And if your players don't like it the way you like it, find players who do like it that way. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, click that subscribe button to stay updated on future releases. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, I have a DM 101 series, which is supposed to be the basics of getting into DMing, which should appear somewhere on the screen at this point. Although I'm not too sure, I always forget to put the end cards in, so it might not be here. But you can find the videos, they're on my channel. And yeah, thank you again. This is the end of the video.